Welcome to, I guess this is actually the first Brett episode of Workforce Wednesday. It's something we've been talking about doing for a long time, and with my guest today is Brett Landrum, who is the co-CEO of PROCareHR. And before we get into our conversation, this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Brett, welcome. I want to do a little preface. We met, I think, the first time at a conference, and we just really hit it off. I would say that Brett has become one of my most valued mentors. It's a little weird to think you're probably like half my age, but mentors can come in all shapes and sizes, and you've taught me so much. And you eat, breathe, and sleep creating better experiences for teams, really for teams and for their employers. And so I'd like to maybe just sort of have you talk a little bit philosophically about sort of how you see this whole workforce culture thing.
Thanks. I think as we talk about the, culture, I think a lot of times we speak about it in this fashion where it's like, it's this really easy output of, shaking hands and being nice to employees and doing all these things. And obviously those types of activities are important, but, personally, I believe a lot of that comes from clarity and discipline and systems. And, because trying to consistently in senior care deliver really good culture across a number of different communities where you have each ED is kind of the CEO of their business. That's really hard to deliver and create culture consistently. And my strong belief is the way that you do that and you get to that output and some of those good cultural outcomes is really by consistent and disciplined execution of the right systems and the basics. And that's stuff that's not none of it's rocket science, but it's really, really hard to I'd say to get adoption in a consistent fashion in a variety of ways. And I think a lot of times culture breaks down because employees are confused and we do different things for different people at different communities. And so it's really installing and encouraging the uptake of a really good systematic framework.
So I'm gonna jump to you turned me on over Christmas to this book called Who, and it's published by some folks out of Atlanta called GH Smart. And what they do that's really fascinating is they've created a methodology for 90% of the time is sort of what they promise, being able to hire A-level players. And I'd like to talk, it's a great book. I recommend it to everybody. It's a quick read. Talk to me about what your exposure to it and how that fits into creating a great culture.
So I got turned on to it actually by our investors, and a little bit of backstory there. When we brought on investors, there was two reasons. One is having the financial backing to really scale our business and continue to improve, enhance our service offering and what we're doing for operators. But also as Eric and I, my business partner and I, were both young, and we had each new ceiling we had to burst through in the business was a first time for us. And so I think a lot of times we were taking the hardest path we could possibly travel to get to the end result. And we felt like, getting more sophisticated investors who had ran and scaled businesses with really good business practices was going to be important. And so, they've really worked hard with Eric and I to take us from, small business entrepreneurs to more, mid-market and large business executives, while still keeping that, entrepreneurial spirit and adaptability alive. And so they actually, I first got introduced to this book because they had us read it and said, hey, you like everybody struggle with hiring, particularly key seats and leaders. This is a really good process that, our other business units follow. And we think it could really, change the talent mix in your organization and increase the odds of success hiring folks. And so, we actually first got intro to it really as how do we do this in our business? And then, as I started reading it and, my own epiphany was like, oh, well, this is why I've made so many mistakes. I'm doing everything wrong, and I'm doing everything the hard way because I'm hiring leaders and they're not working because I'm not doing things the right way. And then you have to go clean up the mess and find the next person. And so I found it, we found it to be really valuable. And the more I thought about senior living and a lot of the operators that we're fortunate enough to partner with, they've got the same issues, and their team that are constantly hiring leaders and key seats have also struggled with the same thing. So I started evangelizing it to a lot of our clients as a methodology that I really believe works. It takes discipline and it's hard, and you got to really teach people how to do it and encourage them. But when you do, it produces fantastic results.
Yeah, so that's the thing that struck me out of reading it. In some respects, it's very simple, right? But when I actually step back and think about the process it takes to implement it, it starts with having to create a very different kind of job description, and then working with that as your guidepost or your North Star to do that. And I have a friend of mine recently who was hired as a brand new executive director. He's a great leader. I want to start by saying that. And so, they made the right decision in hiring him. But as we talked, and he talked to me about the hiring process, he sent a resume into this company and they read it and they found something in there that they liked that was good enough to bring him to Texas and do an interview. And he did an interview for an hour and they liked him and he liked them. And they hired. And liking somebody isn't really necessarily that great a criteria, right?
Yeah. So the part of the process that you're referring to, I think that the job scorecard is really I think about what makes this process hard is kind of three things. Number one is the job scorecard is a really mentally taxing exercise that requires you have the discipline and take the time to really get with your thoughts and figure out what's the bullseye I'm trying to hire. Kind of the second place this breaks down is it's a lot of energy and a lot of organizational energy to go through the top grading exercise. And you have to be pretty bought in to commit that type of resources to the hiring exercise. And then I think the third place it breaks down, and we see this in our organization all the time, is, when you're desperate or when you really want to hire the role, it's really hard to stay consistent and steadfast that hey, this is the process. We're going to go through the process. We're going to commit and stay true to it. And if at the end we have a little bit of doubt, we're not going to hire them. Or, we're not the role's not, even if they're a great person, they got, great experience, great skills, that may not be the right fit for this particular tour of duty. So I think those are the three places that I see it break down. But that job scorecard is really, it's imperative as the starting point for the process.
And we could go into more detail, but really you have to go read the book to understand how to do it. But I will say that you and I, we've sort of discovered one shortcut on the job the job scorecard, and that's to give ChatGPT or an AI a deep description, tell it what you want. It'll understand the method and give you something that it's not going to be perfect, but it's pretty good. And
Yeah.
actually, it's amazingly good. And so it makes life a lot more difficult. There are a couple of other challenges that I see that I'd like to really explore with you. So the first is, and as you know, you and I and some other people working on a solution to this. But particularly when it comes to executive directors and perhaps even with the regionals, that even if you go through this process, there probably are not 30 or 40,000 A-player executive directors out there. What do you do when you've got this position you need to fill and you can't find anybody who's good enough?
Very good question. I think maybe I'll answer it two different ways. One is there are enough, if I'm an operator and I have 5, 10, 20, 50, 100 buildings, there's enough A-player EDs for me or for, a particular client. There may not be enough for the industry as a whole, but there's enough for anyone or a handful of operators. And so I think, putting the scarcity element aside for a minute, if I'm the operator, this is exactly how we started the conversation, which is like it's going to be clarity and culture and those types of things that are going to attract the players to me as an operator versus somebody down the street or in a different geography or whatever. And I think one of the reasons that job, I really am a proponent of that job scorecard, is because it provides such clarity, not just for you, but for the person that you're hiring. And I think
Yeah.
that's an incredible differentiator if I'm an employer to say, look, like this is the mission statement for the role that we're going to hire. Here's the 4 or 5 like really clear, measurable outcomes that I want you and this particular community and this geography to drive, because each ED role and every community is different and it requires a different skill set, a different kind of style and everything else. And a lot of times I think when leaders are assessing job opportunities, what they want to understand is this a home run for me? Can I step up to the plate and have a high degree of confidence that I'm going to knock it out of the park? And the more clarity, the exercise of getting clear as an organization and as the hiring employer also is a really valuable exercise for the person evaluating, do I want to work for this organization? Because you're giving them exactly what the mission is, what the outcomes look like, what the particular skills and cultural competencies are. And I think that gives, when you're competing for talent, particular at the leadership level, I think it gives you a really meaningful leg up on everybody else.
Yeah, because you want people. So two things. The first is I'm going to say go back. I went back to school in my 30s, and I had to take this statistics class. And there was one early in the morning, one late in the afternoon. I went to the afternoon first. The teacher said, "Yeah, I know you guys are not statistician. You don't really care. You have to do this, and so the class is not going to be too hard." The morning class, the guy said, "Here's the book. We are going to go through it. Here's the structure. We're starting today. This will not be the easiest class you took." I went and took the hard class because I actually wanted to learn something. I wanted to be able to have some expertise. And so there are good, really great executive directors want to work for a company where it's not easy, where you stand for something, where you're out changing the world. And that scorecard is a great, great way to start that process. It's the crummy people, and I think it's a great people who, if you're not a very good executive director, you look at that and say, "Ah, man, that's too much work," and you want somebody who loves that hard work. So I love that.
Well, it's the clarity as well. I mean,
Yeah,
like, I think about that in our organization, and I'd love to say I'm great at it, but like, it's a real struggle for me. But particularly with leaders that are going to have more autonomy, which again, an ED is. They're like, they're the CEO of that community. They have a lot of purview, a lot of discretion, and those folks, particularly the really good ones, I believe are seeking clarity so that there's no confusion on what does success look like, right? I mean, that's, if I think about, a lot of my, leadership blunders and what I see out there is a lot of times it's super subjective. I'm in a bad mood that day, and somebody did something that in my mind isn't the right thing to do. But, so I go have a hard conversation and they're like, okay, great. Thanks for the, appreciate the feedback, but am I successful right now? And, unfortunately, sometimes the answer is, well, good question. I'm not sure. Like,
Yeah.
I guess maybe, and you end up just having a really long conversation about are they successful versus being crystal clear that, hey, these are the 5 things we said, these are the 5, measurable things that we said success looks like. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's where you land on all 5. Hey, great. This particular thing wasn't exactly what I expected, but by all accounts, you're successful. And I think that clarity element is such an important driver for those leaders to feel confident and knowing, am I doing a good job? Where I'm off, what are the action steps I need to take to get on pace or on target? And so I think back to my own experience and mistakes and clarity is just, it's so critical.
So, one other question I have about the particular methodology is that he starts the book out talking about hiring a nanny or an au pair or something and it being a disaster and needing to use the A method. And then I read through this thing and I'm thinking it's got resources and it makes a lot of sense for executive directors, for regionals, for big corporate offices. Is there a way to use this as I'm hiring frontline workers? Have you spent much time thinking about
Yeah,
that?
I have quite a bit, both for our organization and others. I think so it's really easy for us to sit in armchair quarterback when there's a massive
Yep.
staffing shortage. So I want to, say that. So how we've adopted in our organization, and we have the range of skills and experiences, et cetera, that we're hiring for, is we really have taken the process and, at the highest level at our executive team, we're following it extremely diligently, really robust top grading sessions. We're going to have 2 or 3 of our senior executives spend 4 or 5 hours going through the whole top grading process, with candidates. And then same thing for really particular key seats. And then as we get into roles that are still important, but not as, I would say, not as like long-term impactful to the organization, we're still running some version of it and taking some of the same principle, applying some of the same principles to the process, but we're really necking it down because, one, we don't have the luxury of like in every single role, having that, having that level of discipline. And 2, we also don't have, I think the time commitment to the organization is just, it's, not palatable. So, to me, probably the most important, I think the couple of things that are really important if you're going to apply this to, frontline team members is it's the gut instinct part of it where, you know, maybe 2 parts. One is I really like the process of top grading, even if you're not doing 4 hours and going through every line on the resume. It's what's the same 10 set of questions I'm going to ask about 2 or 3 jobs and about their life. And the reason is what I'm trying to do is draw out themes, get them comfortable, get folks talking, and ask the same question 2 or 3 different times in different scenarios to understand trends and behaviors. And you don't have to have some huge panel and go through high school on up in order to draw out some of those themes and get utility out of the process. You can do that in an hour and just ask the same 10 questions on 2 or 3 different job or life experiences. So I think that is something that can be applied and with success. The second part, which again is really hard when you need to fill the role, is they talk about it where it's in a more senior role, it's if one person on the hiring team is not a heck yes, it's a no. Like no questions asked. Like, I shouldn't say that. There's usually one or two follow-ups to like get that person comfortable. But if at the end of the process you've got one person that's not comfortable, it's like we're not doing it. We're going to move on to somebody else. Even if that person really likes them, they think they have the skills, if they're like, I just don't, something isn't quite right.
Yeah.
Their philosophy is, well, then don't pull the trigger. And I think applying kind of those two sets of learnings from the methodology to frontline team members can also yield results without requiring a massive change in the cost or time to recruit and hire frontline team members.
So I'll tell you, one of the things I really like about that, Brett, is that on one hand, what you're trying to avoid is the idea of hiring from your gut just because you like somebody. But on the flip side of that, if your gut says don't hire them, you're probably right. And I think that makes a lot of sense to me. So I really like that a lot. The one other thing I want to talk a little bit about, and it sort of comes back to how you started this, is that setting proper expectations and consistency and all those things, I kind of really like it a lot, but I also worry that it gets in the way of kindness and being nice. So at Argentum, there's a guy by the name of James Ree who's going to be keynoting. He keynoted a few years ago. He's got a brand new book called The Red Helicopter out. And I've had him on Foresight TV. Really interesting guy. He saved this women's clothing line from disaster, basically all focused on kindness. And that's not to say he did ignore the bottom line, because he did. But how do you sort of thoughts on how do you mix this kindness and compassion with high standards, and how does that all work?
So I believe that setting clear expectations is compassionate and is empathy, kindness, because the reality is organizations with high standards are going to enforce those standards one way or another. And and sometimes it may take longer because we're not clear or whatever the reason may be, but those standards are going to be enforced. And I think, taking a maybe half glass full approach, I think generally speaking, when you hire people, they want to be successful in their role. Like they want to do well. They want to come to work, feel like they're making a difference, they're being compensated fairly, and that they have a chance to be successful. And, again, when I think about my own blunders, I think some of the biggest ones are not being clear in expectations. And that makes it really, really challenging. And frankly, I think it makes it hard. It makes it harder to connect and be compassionate in other ways when somebody's always on edge because they're wondering, how am I doing? And there's no real clarity around that. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think one supports the other. I think you can be really disciplined about standards and set expectations and be an asshole. I don't, but I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. I think in a lot of respects, having high standards and being clear about them is the compassionate move. And then you pair that with, caring about the person and helping, understand where they're struggling and how you can support them achieving, your mutual goals.
Yeah, and I think that so a couple of thoughts as you're talking go running through my head. I think that there may have been a time in the world of business where people got fired too soon, but I don't know. I can't think of the last time, and it may never have happened, where I've talked to somebody who said, "Oh, I fired that person too soon." Yeah. And because when you have somebody who's not pulling their weight, it ultimately drags everybody else down in the organization. And it's really about upholding those standards that you're talking about.
Yeah. Another way to say that, I had somebody, that's an executive at our investors who said it a little bit different, but I was picking his brain on something. He's like, Brett, when you look back at your entire career, have you ever been like, I'm really glad I waited to fire that person? Like, that was a really good decision.
Yeah.
I was like, no, literally never. I've never done
never.
I've always went back and said, why did that take me so long to make the hard or right decision and move on? And back to your point about empathy, again, like the more I'm in this, my business partner and I's philosophy has been, be ruthless in the decision, like to be very hardened, in the decision, but be very graceful in execution. And because at the end of the day, if somebody's not meeting the mark and we don't have a clear path to getting them there, they know it. And more often than not, they're good people that want to hit the mark and they're struggling and floundering because they're frustrated, they can't figure it out. And I believe that not, the vast majority of the time it's the organization's fault because we put the wrong person in the wrong seat and we weren't clear up front about what did we need, what did success look like, and how does this particular person match up to our needs and their ability to drive the success that we've clearly outlined. And without fail, where we have had leaders leave, I can literally point to every one of them in the history of our business. We hired wrong. And that's not, and oftentimes, like, we're selling them on why they should come and we're convincing them they should come over here. They come over and we've done them a disservice because we haven't been clear up front with ourselves or with them on what success looks like.
Yeah, I love this conversation. We've got just a few minutes left. What I'd actually like to do is we haven't really talked very much about what PROCareHR does. And I want to do, I don't know, not exactly a commercial, but I think what I'd like to ask you is what problems do you solve?
Yeah. So I've really, this will be new for you because I thought about it over the weekend, but I'm changing the way that we think and talk about our business because I had a lot of conversations at Nick and it kind of dawned on me that we're not just an HR service, focused on senior care. Our belief is that as an organization is that if we do better on the people stuff, that quality of care, resident satisfaction and financial results will follow. So that's certainly an important element. But really, I think about ourselves as a business performance platform where we have a mix, a kind of a bundled mix of comprehensive HR services, really tailored for the industry, delivered consistently and predictably. We've got labor cost controls and management to really help operators and investors, manage their biggest spend, which is labor, and control it. And then, we're starting to invest really heavily in data and insights and, how can we leverage the opportunity and the technology that's out there to, inform our execution for our clients as well as, their execution. And when you combine and bundle all those things together, the goal is to have, a really positive and measurable, performance improvement and, our people in HR outcomes, quality of care, financial results and resident satisfaction.
So those are, I like that a lot. It's something you and I have been talking a lot about. And I just think that one of the big shifts I'm seeing in the industry, and I think you're becoming a bigger and bigger role in that, is the recognition that there are outsourcing opportunities that don't take away control. They actually give you more control because they take away, honestly, you take on a lot of the unfun stuff, the unproductive stuff, so that people can go out and do the stuff they're really excellent at. So I like that a lot.
Yeah.
One more question for you. As you just look around senior living, I know that that's all you do is senior living. what are the maybe 2 or 3 places where you see operators having just huge opportunity to make the lives of their team members better? And if you have thoughts on it, maybe what are some things that you um, can I ask it this way? Boneheaded things people do. I'm just going to ask it the way I want to ask it, and
Yeah.
you can choose to answer it or not.
I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's business systems, business systems again. I mean, it's hiring right, like just putting the discipline in place. The thing, like none of the, how we do team building, like there's 5 dysfunctions of a team. There's a framework out there that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like no business, maybe not no, very few business problems are new. So there is established framework, principles, and philosophies for every people related challenge that we encounter. And so often, and we're guilty of this all the time, we're just trying to figure it out ourselves versus like taking a step back, getting really clear on what's the problem we're trying to solve. Maybe it's hiring A players or EDs or whatever, and then going and doing a little bit of research around, hey, what are the methodologies that lots of really successful businesses have deployed, and how can I either just package them up and drop them into my organization, or make some refinements to make sure that they're meeting the specific use case of the industry or our organization. But none of this stuff, I say all the time, like nothing that ProCare does is proprietary. Anybody can do it. It's execution, and execution consistently across a broad, bigger business is all predicated on clarity and systems. Like that's it. It's, can you get lots of people doing the same thing really well, who are really clear on what's expected of them and what success looks like, that are all excited and motivated. And I think it's easy to say, it's really hard in practice, but it's taking 1 or 2 things every year or a quarter and saying, I'm just going to really work on hiring and how we do that and what the process looks like. And I'm going to look at how Google does it and how who does, the Who book, and look at this thing or Netflix. And I'm going to come up with our methodology. I'm going to train everybody on it. And then I'm going to hold them all accountable to following that process so that we can deliver consistent results.
I love it. I'm not even going to go to the negative stuff. That was like the perfect ending. Brett, thank you very much. This has been a great conversation. Hang on for just a minute after we're done. And thank you all for joining us. And we're here to help you create better teams for your organization.